Well, this seems super familiar. Turns out that in 2024, third time was the charm for the Sinner Alcaraz rivalry to finally produce another barn burner. And boy, was that ever the case today over all 3 hours and 21 minutes of this instant classic in the Beijing final. Definitely not your typical 500 final, although, to be fair, Beijing has been consistently one of those higher rung 500 events that's, typically brought in an excellent turnout of the top contingent on the ATP and WTA tour, actually. But I don't know about you, just assessing, conditions and form and the situations that each respective player was in coming into this match, that this one had epic potential all the way. For the record, I was going to pick Sinner in 3. I think that throughout the course of this event, combined with just how exceptional Alcaraz looked at Laver Cup, his hardcourt game arrived about a month later than he needed it this summer on the hard courts in the States, but after looking physically and mentally fried throughout that portion of the season after the Channel Slam and deep Olympic run all the way to the gold medal match in singles, it seemed like the Laver Cup did wonders for Carlos Alcaraz, being around the team, getting the spirits back up, getting the joy back into his game. And he obviously carried in Berlin for Team Europe, and that seemed to clean the slate for him. He continued that sparkling form into Beijing, made it to this final without dropping a set, and pretty straightforward throughout the course of the week, where, I would say it was clear coming into this final that one guy was operating at a higher level relative to what they're capable of. Jannik Sinner, pushed 3 a couple of times, and, not as convincing, but pretty much in cruise control, never really feeling like he was in any danger. As, the best hardcourt player in the world, he has that leeway over pretty much 99% of this tour. And, with both these guys having the major season in the rear view, this not being for a big title, quote-unquote, with the majors, the Olympic gold, or a Masters title, within the confines of this rivalry compared to what they were playing for the last 2 times they'd faced, and those matches turning out kind of patchy, largely each player taking turns, going on some hot streaks, and rarely ever playing well at the same time. I think this year their matchups have kind of dawned on them a little bit, the occasion and the expectations of, people expecting the fireworks of US Open 2022, one of the all-timers already, and then, points akin to that rally in Miami last year. Plus Sinner now this year finally meeting Alcaraz as a player at the summit. Every time that these guys were going to play this year and are going to play from here on out, it's going to be a lot of buzz, a lot of hype, and, I do feel like that somewhat contributed to, sort of tight showings throughout their 2 matches this year, but that was not the case at all today, and I was very, very impressed by both guys throughout the course of this match. This is pretty much like a baby US Open 2022 match condensed into best of 3. I think that goes especially as far as progression because, you watch the match, and throughout it, I think you probably come away like Alcaraz was the better player. The better player ended up winning, and you can't really explain how it ended up being as close as it was. You can't really explain how he got as close to losing as he did, because really from the jump, Alcaraz stayed hot early on, announced his presence, went up love 40, immediately lost that, and still, pretty much throughout in control of that set, broke the very next game anyways, the second Sinner service game, held all the way on to 5-3, couldn't serve it out. 5-6, he gets an opportunity on the Sinner serve. First set point, that goes. It was made, a big deal of Jannik, I think, in tiebreakers coming into this match. He'd been on a bit of a Djokovician run, 17 of his last 18, pushed to 18 of his last 19 at the end of this first set breaker, where, again, Alcaraz pushed it to 6-4. But here, to be fair, Jannik Sinner was just ice cold. Ace, line-licking ace on the first one, and then just a phenomenal return. Used the pace of an Alcaraz first server that didn't hit its spot, but, got it back deep and hard, and it was as good as a winner. From 6-all, a couple of disastrous points for Carlos Alcaraz. And, at the end of this first set, I kind of was feeling some deja vu, because this did feel similar to, their first set last year, which I think Alcaraz lost 7-5, but he was up a break 2 different times in that match, and I'm pretty sure he gave it back immediately. And then, after that tough first set, he went away pretty quickly in the 2023 match. I think that first set tiebreak is a perfect, example of just winning momentum and, Sinner being on this great roll, kind of restarting the momentum that he had started the year with, winning Cincinnati, winning the US Open. And being able to get away with, still not playing your best, but able to, hang within striking distance long enough to where you give yourself the chance. And, when you get into these tight, nip and tuck situations where it's anyone's game, you have to feel very good about yourself. You have to feel, I back myself over anybody, even if that is, my topmost rival who, sees me on even footing, unlike the rest of the tour right now. And that first set itself, I think it's such an apt, representation of what we've seen so far in this rivalry play out as far as dynamics. You've got your Sinner, who was just pretty much sitting at a baseline, like 7 out of 10. That's the floor. He's gotten to a place where, he's not ever going to be donating, just leaking errors. And he's just the best in the world at one, fundamental piece of tennis, which is just linear ball striking from the baseline. And meanwhile, on the other end, you've got Alcaraz, this bag of tricks and explosive firepower that, 1 second, you're wondering, does this guy have GOAT potential? Like, is he the best I've ever seen? And the next, within, the same set, the dips will come out of nowhere, and they will look ghastly. And that's kind of how we looked at the end of the first set. Those last 2 misses were just horrible. Total unforced errors that, you typically, for most guys, are just like, you can't have that. You can't have that happen at that time. But in Carlos Alcaraz's case, this year, a more full fuel tank, not as much immediate mileage, with the North American hardcourt swing being prematurely ended for him. That certainly paid off. Unlike 2023, he didn't go away at all. He just kind of turned the page, dug in, and didn't at all look like a guy that when set 2 started that had won more points, had hit more winners, had more chances, had blown 3 set points, and lost, the preceding set. He didn't look even the slightest bit dejected, even in a spot of danger, especially immediately after the first, having to serve from behind, serving second throughout the course of this second set. I think he showed Jannik that, he was still going to compete. He was still here for the long haul early on in the second. I do think the first was a case of Sinner kind of weathering the storm and pouncing when he got the dip, plus just coming in clutch in the breaker. Second kind of just went by. Alcaraz obviously, re-announcing his presence early on. Both these guys getting a couple routine holds under the belt. 3-2 and then 3-all. Each guy kind of tests the other guy on serve. Alcaraz got Two breakpoint looks, Jannik Sinner did quite well to save them both. And then I think we get to the pivotal, super long, drawn out 3-4 game with Alcaraz serving. And in this particular game, we talked about Sinner weathering the storm. It seemed like Alcaraz had to weather, his game kind of just going on walkabout on him in this game, because this game shouldn't really have even gone as long as it did. He was up 40-15 in the game, played some sensational tennis to get the lead, and then from this point on, he continued to do so, but he immediately followed it up with just some boneheaded shots and really puzzling misses. And yeah, he really was teetering in this game. Sinner even got himself 2 breakpoint looks, but Carlos found 2 excellent first serves to save both of them. He also obviously had that just tremendous reflex, get by Sinner off just a zipped Alcaraz running forehand, damn near knocked Sinner over. But, he was able to reset and rip a forehand to win that point. Possibly the best highlight for Jannik throughout this match. There were a lot of them for him as well. And, in the alternate timeline, if he was going to win this match, he would have probably had to have broken here. I think this was really the one true window where he had a chance. There was the light at the end of the tunnel for him. Just given, the longer this match went, Alcaraz was, the stronger physically, and obviously, just how that tiebreaker went down even after Jannik had the lead. But anyways, Alcaraz finally found a way to win a point on the ad side, closed out the game. Kind of a boomerang effect. After getting out of trouble there, Jannik played a loose game to follow it 4-all. Alcaraz broke, served out the set without much issue. And yeah, the rest of the way, Alcaraz looked the stronger player physically, as I sort of just touched on. He kind of just kept trudging forward with his momentum, broke early, had a chance for the insurance break, 2 of them a 15-40 at 1-3. And with the nature of the Carlos Alcaraz roller coaster, you just kind of knew, at least looking at that moment, like, circle it back if, this match has another twist in it, or you get that trademark Carlitos walkabout. It didn't happen immediately, but boy was that 4-3 game ugly. Broken to 15, and 3 out of the 4 just straight up unforced errors off the racket of Carlos Alcaraz. Again, next time he stepped to the line to serve, found himself down 4-5. There's another time where there was a huge chance to blink, especially once Jannik Sinner got it to 15-30, 2 points away. And then again, you get the flip side of the coin, the cojones part of the equation, because 15-30, there's really no need to hit a drop shot here, and he didn't hit a particularly great one. It actually could have costed him on a third ball that, really could have just been hammered away. But Alcaraz went the right way. 30-all, he played some great defense initially off a really good return from Sinner, and then immediately after getting back to neutral, got a ball, just grip and rip the two-hander cross for a winner. Throughout the course of this match, Alcaraz was very, very good at net. Came in a good deal, I think, 26 of 34 for the match, but he flubbed a pretty easy volley at 40-30 to get out of that game, and immediately just turned around, serve volleyed, bunted away a pretty, albeit easy volley. But you just love to see that type of fearlessness, going right back in right after you just kind of flubbed a sitter. Got out of that game and carried that momentum over into the 5-all game with a couple spectacular shots to get to love 30. And then back comes Jannik Sinner now this time. Hung around long enough to extract some errors. 30-all, played, really nice cat and mouse point where outfoxed Alcaraz at the net. Saved a break point himself, again, turned into a deuce game. But Sinner got out of trouble. Alcaraz, pretty effortlessly pushed us into a deciding set tiebreaker, and obviously this is where your fireworks begin. This was, aside from 1 point, a perfectly played tiebreaker by Jannik Sinner. He could not have really done much else. And a guy who, at that point, had won 18 of his last 19 tiebreakers, stole the opening set breaker here, and began this breaker for the trophy with, a nice 1-2 forehand combo. First point, delicate drop shot on the second to get the first mini break that had Alcaraz, bust through his shoe. And then a third point where he just hammered a second serve return straight at Carlos's feet. And you're thinking, yeah, he's about to do it again. This guy's just the new Novak in tiebreakers, right? And then Carlos Alcaraz went nuclear. Watching this live, this was something that, took me back to 2019, 2020. Dominic Thiem in these deciding set tiebreakers against Novak Djokovic, down, I think, 4-1 and 4-0, I want to say. Something crazy like that, where, in both situations, a Sinner, a Djokovic, they just don't lose from those positions, You give up 2 mini breaks on serve, that is wraps in a tiebreaker against these guys. Unless, what do you know, your opponent just throws caution to the wind and just starts connecting with these huge cuts. And, Alcaraz, again, you gotta look from this point, it was grip and rip. He made great contact every time he did it. For Jannik Sinner's 2 serve points to follow, he did about as well as you could. It actually wasn't the grip and rip, because both times it was Sinner coming up with, some tremendous defense. Defense that would put most guys in quite a bind, but obviously Carlos Alcaraz is not most guys. Commentators said, at a point, that it felt like it was must-have for Alcaraz to keep this thing alive. It's just unfair to have this explosive breakneck pace at your disposal and have it coupled with, I'm ready to say it at this point, the best volleys on tour, the best hands on tour. And at this point, I don't even think it's up for dispute after, some of the ridiculous touch shots he pulled off at Laver Cup and continued into today. So where are we? He unloads on this inside-in forehand. Sinner gets a good dig on it, keeps his reply low, and Alcaraz just keeps moving forward, trying to take away as much time as he can, kind of just slides into this half-volley drop shot, and not much Sinner can do with it. Just sets up for an easy volley into the open court. 1-3, the point of the match. One of the points of the year, really. Maybe even, when we look back of all time in this rivalry. But Alcaraz hits a perfect backhand return, follows it into net. Sinner just throws up just as perfect a lob in response, showing off tremendous defensive skills again. Lob pretty much drops just inside the baseline, gets us back to neutral. Alcaraz breaks the point open again with this wicked angled cross forehand. And again, Jannik does as well as he can. Squash shot deep out of the corner and keeps it low again. Again, Alcaraz slides into this, dink half volley drop shot. And Sinner, full sprint, does really well to track it down. And even gets, a decent amount of pace on it, guiding it up the line. And, Alcaraz just reflexes it back, extends the claw, and does just enough to block it back out into the open court. What follows is ace, makes it 4-3, and then, this is the point where I was like, I am watching Dominic Thiem 2019-2020 Tour Finals against Novak all over again. Couple of trades. First ball that hangs in the air a little bit, just unloading on an inside-out forehand for a winner. At this point, I'm Sinner. I didn't put a foot wrong, and I'm down 5-3 in, just the most obscene fashion. So, I can't fault him if he was shell-shocked at this point. The one thing, he put a foot wrong was hitting an unforced error at 3-5 on a third ball. And then Alcaraz uncorks one last booming inside-out forehand to seal the title. Thrilling, absurd stuff. Just an absolute avalanche to the finish line from Carlos Alcaraz. His non-Indian Wells hardcourt woes can be put to bed. And I think more importantly, I'm just thrilled that we got, this epic match, because there have been a shortage of them on the men's side. I mean, majors didn't really deliver one this season. I think the closest might be Zverev Medvedev at the Oz. I'm comfortable calling this the match of the year. I think the only contender is Djokovic Alcaraz in the Olympic gold medal match. This one, of course, had the deciding set, so, made for some additional drama. And yeah, I mean, it is so awesome that, we finally got what this rivalry is capable of delivering. What we saw it was capable of delivering 2 years ago in that U.S. Open quarterfinal, and had only really gotten in bits and patches since then. As I touched upon earlier in the video, I would say expectations this year also played into that, but I think it's just so fitting that these two who split the majors this season, we finally get a match between the two of them that really just puts a fingerprint on the year and their shared excellence throughout it and on the court in this final in particular. Before this match, I was leaning Sinner. I thought, conditions would favor him, and I thought he had more to play for. Obviously, stakes, not as high now with the majors in the rear view for this year. For his part, after reigniting the hot streak in Cincinnati in the U.S. Open, he probably wouldn't have wanted to fall to 0-3 to Carlos Alcaraz, particularly now, on a surface that more so favors Jannik Sinner. Dropping to 0-3 now against Alcaraz on the year, it is what it is. I can't really say I would feel that bad if I was Sinner. He put in a really, really mentally, resolute, resilient performance. I think definitely stepped up his standard of play from what he'd showed all week, and ultimately ended up coming up just short. Like I said, this was your baby U.S. Open 2022 pretty much in every way. I can't really sit here and say this is like a fluke, where it was clear that in spite of, Alcaraz creating more chances, winning a good bit more points, having all these leads that could have made the scoreline make it look easier for him. But at this point, we are 10 matches in, and one of the number one trends in this rivalry is just the violent momentum shifts. And you can mark that down to a variety of things. Both guys are still in the process of mastering their serves. And then you do have Carlos Alcaraz's propensity to just blow hot and cold. And I think that's magnified in this rivalry because it's by contrast to just how steady Sinner always is. And one last note on Jannik before moving on to the Alcaraz side is, I do feel like the number one takeaway from this is it does feel tactically like a little bit of a backslide, where things don't feel like they are naturally more geared in Jannik's favor like it felt like it was prior to this year. Now, Indian Wells, Alcaraz made the adjustment. He played with more shape. He played varying up the paces, the spins, the heights, and that seemed to throw the first wrench into the matchup. But since then, that hasn't really been the game plan for Alcaraz. He sort of employed it at Roland Garros. I thought particularly to get back into that match after falling behind early. But I think what made the difference there, and also here today, was kind of just staying present in the match to a point where he wore Sinner down and got him to a point where he could, take advantage of the still strong physical edge in the Alcaraz corner. All the while, shot making and bludgeoning his way out of trouble more than anything. And knowing he had the physical edge probably was something that was a dialogue in the back of his head, even when he, blew the lead in the third, was, probably knowing I'll still be in good shape. I'm going to be fresher at the back end of this match. On the Alcaraz end, it is a signature victory, and I'm kind of getting to a place where after this year, I'm not totally sure if Alcaraz ever loses this roller coaster tendency of his. Don't get me wrong, I mean, there is plenty of time, obviously, for him to master controlled aggression, and we all talk about this, that hypothetical Alcaraz that masters controlled aggression, he'd feel damn near unstoppable. But I don't know if we ever get there, and I'm here to tell you, I don't think that has to be a bad thing. The peaks and valleys, at this point have been a thing in every big match that he has played. All except Wimbledon 2024. And I do believe that every subsequent year, it's felt like he's gotten better and better. But, the ups and downs are still there. And you know what? It feels like they are kind of a part of what make him him. It is really hard to argue with the results. The results would say, there's no need to change anything. At this point, at every marker, at every age, you are keeping pace as the best or second, third best at, 19, 20, 21. And if you're going to ask him to pull back a little bit, I don't know if you have just the same alien-like clutchness out of this guy. I don't know if you still have the same guy that just plays and believes in every single shot and decision 100% under pressure, regardless of how audacious it is, and is willing to live with the results. And to this point, the results have overwhelmingly been in his favor. A lot of times doing it, overcoming these, self-inflicted wounds, and often flirting with disaster. I understand it can look ugly, but, the guy just seems to have the innate feel for, how close to the flame he can fly before that uncanny survival instinct kicks in. And when it does, he is as clutch as anybody that's ever played this game. I'm just saying, Carlos Alcaraz, all in all, big picture, he's not doing too shabby as is. And finally, it seems like in the home stretch of this season, the talk of the player of the year for 2024 is only going to get more interesting. And it does seem like we are headed in a direction similar to 2017 where, one guy displayed year-round excellence and, is going to end up number one. I know Sinner doesn't have it set in stone, but I think he is going to perform well enough through this end of the season to wrap that up soon. On the other hand, you have a guy who dominated the head-to-head, didn't play as much, but also accumulated the accolades on the year to be in that mix and be able to make a case for them as the player of the year. Not entirely an apples-to-apples comparison, but that basic skeleton is there with Federer, Nadal in 2017 to Alcaraz, Sinner in 2024. Obviously, this will be a continually evolving conversation with 2 more Masters and the Tour Finals still left to play for. And shout out the Asian swing because, boy, did we miss it. I mean, we have had a really fun return between last year and the start this year. Obviously, match of the year contender here in the Beijing final, and also, a tremendous run from Arthur Fils in Tokyo, with more fun promised ahead in Shanghai with the return of Djokovic. But that's all I got. I'm still hyped. I'm still buzzing. Such a fun match. This is what it's all about. Matches like this is why, from the beginning we got so excited about the potential of this rivalry. And I'm really excited to see what the pair has in store for us the rest of this year. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I know it was a long one, but, it's a long-ass match, so what can you do? If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, it would be much appreciated if you could drop a like, help this video perform better in YouTube's algorithm, and also subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you all again so much for watching, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.